Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher and this is Presidential Chronicles, the series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Benjamin Harrison, and the focus is getting noticed. The year is 1854, and Harrison had a decision to make. He had just passed the bar, just recently gotten married, but where was he going to set up his shingle to go to work? Didn't want to go back to Cincinnati. Didn't have a good experience there, even though it was really close by. That's when he was studying the law. Didn't go all that well, and he also didn't want to go to Chicago. Thought there were too many lawyers there already. So he decided to go to his neighboring state of Indiana and go to that capital of Indianapolis. The problem was he had no relationships in that town. He had no clients. He had no income, and he had a pregnant wife. His wife, Carrie, was pregnant, and they decided, you know what? Let's send you back to your family in Oxford, Ohio. Go have the baby there. So now he's on his own. He's lonely. He's bored. He writes his wife that, indeed, I would almost be willing to work for nothing just for the sake of being busy. But however much I may be discouraged at the prospect, I never suffer myself to falter in my purpose. I have long since made up my mind that with God's blessing and good health, I would succeed. And I never allow myself to doubt the result. Well, Carrie had a baby boy. They named him Russell. This is in August of 1854. They come back to Indianapolis. Now they have 3 mouths to feed. They had moved into a 3-room home, which they couldn't afford. So he needed to get some breaks, and fortunately, a couple were coming his way. The first came from a friend by the name of John Ray, who found Harrison some office space in the State Bank building, so a little bit more prominent place in which to do his business, maybe to court those clients. He also got a steady income, a small one, but a steady one. He was appointed to the position of court crier. It came with remuneration of $2.50 a day. He was really happy to have that. Any flow of income at the time was a good deal. But more importantly, he actually found a partner. William Wallace was an aspiring politician who wanted to go out campaigning, and he needed somebody, a junior partner, to come in and kind of take care of his law firm. And he found Harrison. They formed a partnership, and they would stay together for 6 years. It was a good partnership, productive. Mostly focused the partnership on civil cases. There was a lot of debt collection work, a lot of divorce proceedings, because Indiana actually had pretty liberal divorce laws compared to the other states around at that time. Church and baby Russell, though, were really the centers of the lives of Ben and Carrie Harrison. They joined the First Presbyterian Church. He became a deacon, eventually an elder. It would be their church for 40 years. In their home, still just like growing up, morning and evening prayers. The Sabbath was strictly observed. There would be no work on the Sabbath. Harrison, of course, drawn to politics. It was in his family blood. His grandfather and his father had both been members of the Whig Party, but that party pretty much had dissipated. The Whigs had gone away by the early 1850s, and other parties were springing up to take its place. And Harrison's father, John Harrison, actually gravitated to the American Party that was more commonly known as the Know-Nothing Party. And Harrison wasn't really interested in this, so he moved on to the Republican Party. Brand new party, primarily sectional, only in the North. They embraced most of the tenets of the Whig Party with one addition: no more expansion of slavery. That was the line in the sand for the Republicans. Now, there were tensions at the time. There were tensions actually between Ben Harrison and his father. There's a little bit of a political rift going on as they went politically in a different direction. You can see some tension in their correspondence, but there was also tension in the country, particularly in Kansas, which that territory, there was a mini civil war going on. Since the Kansas-Nebraska Act had passed, people from the North and the South had been piling into this territory, trying to get there first to establish a government that would either be pro or against slavery. Very tense time going on in what they called Bleeding Kansas. So what did this mean for the national election of 1856? Harrison was supporting the first Republican candidate, which was John Fremont. But again, the Republicans were still primarily just in the North. They were not a national party yet. The Democrats really owned that, and James Buchanan won the presidency. Locally, though, the Republicans were kind of on the rise in Indianapolis, which was a good thing for Harrison, who took his opportunity to run for office for city attorney. He's 24 years old at the time. The Republicans did well across the board. Harrison wins this job. Great courtroom opportunity for him to get that experience, also some exposure, opportunity to impress clients. So this was a really good opportunity for him. But there was also an opportunity maybe then to run for state office, and his friends were kind of pushing him in this direction. Go run for the state legislature. This time Harrison said no. He decided to take what in essence was a sure thing, an offer from the Republican Party in the state for a position rather than to run for elective office. And this role was as the secretary of the State Central Committee of the Republican Party of Indiana, which turned out to be a perfect fit. It was really the center of party activity. He mainly did the bidding of political bosses from across the state. He made himself indispensable for their work, established a network of relationships that he didn't have before that was going to be key if he ever wanted to really advance to the state level in politics in the state of Indiana. Plus, he could keep doing his job as a private attorney, so he could keep having that income as well, which was important because they had another mouth to feed. 1858, Carrie gave birth to a daughter. They named her Mary, but they would more often call her either Mame or Mamie. A couple years later, 1860, another election year nationally, and tensions are even greater in terms of this friction over slavery and potential expansion between North and South. This time it was the Democrats that fractured. They had two conventions. They could not unify around a candidate. That opened the door wide for the Republicans who went into their convention. People thought maybe William Seward was the leader going into that to get the nomination, but on the third ballot it was actually Abraham Lincoln who became the nominee for the Republicans in 1860. Back in the state of Indiana, once again, an election year there as well, and Ben Harrison did decide to run for state office, but not on the legislative side. He decided to run for the lowest rung on the executive branch, was for the reporter for the state Supreme Court. For this job, basically, was to monitor the activities of the court, write up all their decisions, combine them, put them in a book, and then basically go push that book out to lawyers across the state. His incentive? He got to keep the profits. So if he did a good job, this could be potentially quite lucrative. Well, he got the nomination. It was competitive to actually get the nomination, but his job as the party secretary actually really helped. So he got the Republican nomination and he went on the campaign trail. In one case, one of his early opportunities to stump came following another candidate, much more prominent, by the name of Caleb Smith. And when Smith finished talking, a lot of people started to leave when young Ben Harrison got on stage and he started to speak, and he really captured people's attention. He was making some points that they wanted to hear, so they came back, they sat down, they listened, and a reporter from the Atlas newspaper described it this way: "There was no attempt at star-spangled oratory, no flights of eloquence, no amusing anecdotes. Ben got down to facts immediately, warning his audience of the dangers that menaced the country. He had courage, if not wisdom, with him, for he went so far as to prophesy concerning the insidious inroads of the slavery power unless the people arose in their might and put an end to them." People listened. He was starting to get noticed. In fact, Harrison was really good on the stump. He was a powerful, effective orator. Again, maybe not as flamboyant as others. He was more to the point, but he was very effective. Kind of different from his personal engagement at times, which is described as kind of more cold and aloof. But when he was on the campaign trail, when he was on the stump, really came out the best in him, very effective in that role. Now, he was going to get a test. He was off stumping in Rockville, Indiana, and he was due to speak, turned out, at the same day and the same time as a different candidate from the other side. But this was the candidate for governor, the top spot in the state. Thomas Hendricks was the Democratic candidate. Now, Harrison basically said, I'm going to cancel. I'm not going up against this guy at the same place and the same time. But Hendricks's folks actually tried to turn it around and say, you know what, young man? Why don't we have a debate? Let's do it together. Well, Harrison said, that's not fair. You've got all this experience. You're the top of the ladder. I'm at the bottom. This didn't seem like a good idea to him at all. But his Republican colleagues pushed him and said, yes, go take this on. See what you can do. So he agreed. Courthouse was packed that day for this session. In fact, it was so crowded that Harrison didn't even have a place to sit. He had to he plopped himself down on the edge of a desk, had his feet dangling for the next 4 hours while Hendricks took the stage giving his address. It was supposed to be 2 hours. He doubled that. 4 hours later, Harrison finally had his chance and got off to a little bit slow start, but then he was actually heckled by a prominent Democrat in the crowd. And this is when Harrison actually fired back with a quip. The audience got really behind him. They laughed over that one, and they really started to encourage him because about half the crowd was from the Republican side, and Harrison got on a roll. It ended up being a real triumph for the young candidate. The chairman of the meeting who had put this thing together had said, I have heard a good many political debates in my day, but I never heard a man skin an opponent as quickly as Ben Harrison did Hendricks that day. Again, people were starting to notice. Well, the Republicans ended up running their slate, ran the table at the state elections, including Harrison being elected to that position of state reporter. kind of a precursor to the following month for the national election, when Abraham Lincoln did indeed win the presidency. Secession from the southern states began almost immediately. 7 states declaring their move to opt out of the Union before Lincoln even was inaugurated. Now, Lincoln was actually quiet on any measures of politics or policy during the entire interregnum. But when he started his slow journey from Springfield, Illinois to Washington, D.C. to take his oath of office, he made a bunch of stops along the way. And again, he didn't really give much political speech, but he did come and speak to a number of places, including in Indianapolis. This was on February the 11th of 1861, and Ben Harrison was there, and he remembered Lincoln's speech more for the mood and the emotions of the event than actually the substance. Harrison wrote later that it seemed to me hardly to be a glad crowd, and he not to be a glad man. Men did not shrink, but there was that vague sense of apprehension, that unlocated expectancy of evil which fills the air and disturbs the beasts of the field when the unclouded sun is eclipsed. This was the tone of the country at the time. Well, Lincoln did go on, took his inauguration. The following month, he decided to re-provision Fort Sumter in the harbor of South Carolina. The Confederates said no. They bombarded, captured the fort, and the Civil War was underway by April of 1861. Lincoln called out for 75,000 volunteers from the north to man the Union Army. Indiana's quota was 12,000 men, and while Harrison fully supported the war effort, he was not in that 12,000. He believed that he had responsibilities at home, to his family, and his new state office. He had just been elected to state office. Family needed the money, so in terms of going to war for Harrison, at least not yet. His focus was to make those reports for the Supreme Court the best any Indiana had ever seen so he could sell them and make a profit. He added indices, synopses, really did enhance sales to the lawyers across the state, but he was working nonstop, both in that job with his private clients. Now, William Wallace had actually finally won elected office himself, so they disbanded that partnership. Harrison brought in a junior partner of his own, a gentleman by the name of William Pink Fishback. And Fishback actually remembered at the time that during this time I was his partner, he worked like a slave. He was working to pay for his house and came near wrecking his health by overwork. Carrie had to get him to slow down at times when she could, which was pretty hard based on his personal work ethics. Now, 1862, the war effort is not going well. George McClellan had failed in his bid to capture Richmond. Lincoln was disturbed by this. He said, I need more troops. He put out a call for 300,000 more volunteers. Now, this time, the state of Indiana was kind of slow to respond, and the governor, Oliver Morton, was concerned about this. In fact, he confided in his state reporter, Benjamin Harrison, who captured in his diary his own reflection of the conversation, which was important in his life. According to Harrison, the governor seemed quite discouraged at the apathy of the people, and pointing over towards the Gallup block, where men were dressing stone, remarked that men were interested in their own business more than the safety of the nation. I said right there, Governor, if I can be of service to my country, I'm ready to go. And with that, he went home, took out the flag, put it out in front of his house, and he went about to do the governor's bidding, which was to recruit a full regiment. Now, a full regiment is 1,000 people. That was a lot starting from scratch. He started out, though, with one rally. Again, he was the best as he could be when he was on the stump, this time encouraging his fellow Hoosiers to sign up. That rally was so successful, he then held another one. Now, there was another piece of reality going on, because there were Confederate raids in and around this entire region going on. And so people were also nervous about their own homes. And so there was a fair amount of motivation here to actually sign up. But sure enough, to Harrison's credit, within several weeks, he finally had the quota filled. The 1,000 men were in place. The 70th Indiana Regiment was ready to go. Only one decision was to be made, and that was in the hands of Governor Morton. Who was going to lead? Who was going to be the colonel to lead this regiment? That appointment, no surprise, went to Ben Harrison. This was his regiment. He raised it. Now it was time to lead it. He was about ready to go to war, but that is the story for another day. That's Benjamin Harrison and Getting Noticed from the life of Benjamin Harrison. For more Presidential Chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.